So if we've created this first sort of little initial definition. We've learned what a number slider is and what number inputs are. We've talked about components, what the name of the component is, what the input values are, and what the output values are. We talked about number panels, okay, or panels that allow us to see what the output component is, or the output pieces. This is just simply one set of coordinates. Then we talked about deconstructing a point where we feed the point into that thing and it gives us the respective x, y, z. So very simple little definition, doesn't really do anything. And we talked about the fact that in Rhino, the point isn't really there. So if I was to open the Rhino file by itself, you would find that there's nothing in it. The little red X does not appear until you open the Grasshopper definition. Okay? So the next thing I want to kind of talk about is I want to drop a surface. Okay, and so under surface, under primitives, so again, looking at these tabs, we got params, math, set, vectors, curves, and surfaces. And under surfaces, there are a variety of different panels. There's analysis, freeform, primitive, and utilities. So under primitive, you'll see that sphere becomes one of the objects that you can drop in. And so I'm going to drop that onto the canvas, and you'll see that I immediately get a little sphere over on the side over in here. Okay, I'll deselect it and zoom in on it. So the sphere has to be created on a base plane. Okay, so if we look at the sphere component, right, we hover over the various inputs and outputs, you're going to find out that there is a base plane, right, for the input, and there is a radius for another input, and that's what gives us the sphere. Okay, so let's try and change the radius of this sphere by grabbing a number slider. So I'm going to show you a different way to input a number slider right now. Okay, so I'm going to double click and type in 0 less than 100, and I'm going to press enter. Okay, so by typing in that initial box a number followed by a less than and then another number, it automatically creates a number slider. Okay, and so this number slider essentially is created with the ability to go from 0 to 100. Okay, and it automatically defaults to integers because the values that I used were numbers. They were whole numbers. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and feed that into the radius. Okay, and right now it has a radius of 0, so it's non-existent, but I can start to move that thing across, and it makes a larger radius. So I'm going to put us into perspective mode and zoom out. Right there you can start to see that you get a sphere. Okay. So what I want to do next is I want to try and start to create a definition that's going to mimic our solar system. Okay, so this first sort of sphere that we've dropped on here, it's essentially kind of it's creating a sphere right at the origin at 0, 0. So if we were to, I'm going to try something right now. I'm going to see if it works or it doesn't work. So I believe I'm going to grab an XY plane out of the vector components and drop it down here. All right, and we have an origin. All right, that's basically one locally defined value. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this construct point right here, and I'm going to try and feed it into this XY plane. Okay, so here goes. I'm going to copy this entire grouping. Control copy, then Control V, and I'm going to move it down. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, pan over, oops. Okay, so what I did is I grabbed the output of this construct point, right? And I fed that output of construct point into an XY plane. So in order for you to see that, I'm going to delete the sphere. Okay? So I'll delete the sphere, and what I'm going to do is change. I'm going to click on that and zoom in. So notice that this is green, right? So when I zoom in, oops, sorry, use this button right here to view the entire document. I'm going to click over here and zoom in over here. You see that green XY plane? Right there? It's behind, it's sort of superimposed on the Rhino XY plane. So what I've done is I've created that XY plane in such a way that I can move it around. And so I can take this number slider and slide it across, and it moves it over 10. I can take this number slider, move it across, and take this number slide and move it across, and it moves it in any of those directions. Okay? That make sense? So the next thing I'm going to do is bring that radius back. And what I'm going to do with the radius is I'm going to drop it so that the point that feeds the radius, remember the radius has two inputs. It has a base plane and it's got a radius. So if I feed the surface sphere into the XY plane that I've created, this little green plane, that is going to appear on it. So let's take a look at what happens. I'm going to move this over far enough. Oops. So I'm going to move it out of plane with this, with the sphere. Okay, so watch what happens when I feed that point into the base plane of the sphere. So now what I've done is I've constructed a point, I've dropped a plane on that point, and I've dropped a sphere onto that plane. Now once I put the number slider into the sphere, right, I have adjustability in the size of that sphere. All right? Any questions so far? So this, I'm going to go ahead and stop this right now and just walk around and see what you guys I've got done.